Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff, we have never done this before. Chris Brown is in the middle of the struggle in early sobriety. He's a good buddy of mine. We go all the way back, I guess, to the first TV news station I worked at in Louisiana. He is a lifer in news, or most of his life. Now he is in politics. But he's articulate. He has a way of getting across exactly where he is. He's funny. He's a gay dude. And we talk about that, some of the problems, or maybe some of the challenges, per se, that come with just kind of finding your place in sobriety, being in that role. And he makes me laugh and makes me smile. Just a little bit of context when we start this conversation off. I had talked to Chris earlier and asked him about doing this, and his response was, sure. And I was like, come on, you can't give me sure. Let's get some enthusiasm. I'm not good with sure. And that kind of sets up the beginning of our dialogue that was off mic that we began with. But Chris is the best, and no more talk from me. But first, a song by Kevin Souza. And Chris Brown is back with us live from the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Festive day for many, Chris.
Yeah.
But have protesters been able to make their mark?
Yeah, well, protesters are actually clashing with police over toward McPherson Square.
Well, you know how we do it, Chris. So this is just, you've listened to a couple before, I guess, correct?
Sure.
So this is it's fucking sure again. So this is just like a free-flowing conversation, right?
Yeah. I do.
I have known Chris. You've been in my life for 7 years? 7 years. Six or 7 years.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yep, since KNOE, back in the day.
Yeah, Chris is a powerhouse, and I'm not lying. An incredible news anchor, journalist first. And you've been doing this. What was the Chris Brown show? When did you do that?
So I started with the Chris Brown show in television when I was 14. I was mowing the yard, and I realized that manual labor was not for me. And so I had to find something else to do that would give me something to do with my time. So that's when I started in TV, and I didn't leave television until 2018. And even just as recently as Monday, I was just doing interviews for the government job that I have now.
And can we say your job?
Yeah. So right now I'm the public information director for the Louisiana Department of Labor.
Yeah. So you work at the Capitol.
Some days, most days I'm at the LWC building, but yeah, I spend some time at the Capitol working with lawmakers, working with the governor's office, working with the Secretary of Labor. It's a big job, but we have a really solid team, and that makes things a lot easier. But the pandemic was, frankly, was hard for so many people, but especially in the labor world. I mean, a lot of people found themselves without work, and we certainly had our work cut out for us here. And so I came here. I left California and moved here in 2021. Back to Louisiana, which is not a place I thought I would be again after leaving and going to California, but we're back, and I really feel like we're doing good things. It's a switch from news, and I do miss television, but I do feel like we work really hard to help people every day, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, and I see the work you're doing, and I know if you were passionate about journalism, you were just as passionate about people and politics and the impact you can have on them. So it doesn't surprise me. It does surprise me that you're out of TV. I don't know how long that'll last, but
it does have a tendency to suck me back in. So
yeah. And so you're
happened
there
once before.
and you're there with Zach, right? Your husband.
Yeah. So Zach and I just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. We've been together about 8 months when I got the call about the job in Monroe, Louisiana, which is in northeast Louisiana. And I'd always wanted to anchor the 6 o'clock news. And so it was either there or Grand Rapids. And I chose Monroe because it was a full-time anchor the 6 o'clock news gig. I got to work with you, some other really wonderful people. I got very lucky in that my friend from Savannah, Jennifer Andrews, wanted to move back to Louisiana. So we've been friends for years, and she is also a news anchor. And so I got to anchor the news with her, which made things a lot easier when you're sitting up there next to somebody you trust. But the thing that nobody knew about me, unless you knew me, was that during all of this, I'm constantly struggling with my sobriety and trying to figure out how I navigate my life while knowing full well that I am an alcoholic. That's not easy. That's not easy to do.
No, especially when you're experiencing success. So I have to imagine, well, I know from personal experience, you kind of feel like a bit of a fraud because especially you like you said, you are the face of our station. You're the evening news anchor and you're well compensated and you're out there, especially when you're a news anchor, right? You're buttoned up, but when you leave, school's out.
Right. And news is an industry that lends itself to drinking. I mean, when you think about it. So in 2014, I went to inpatient rehab. I was drinking.
So let's go back to your story, right? So because I want to get into this. So you grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Grew up in North Carolina.
Okay.
Southern boy, born and raised.
Okay.
Yeah, and grew up in a pretty traditional household. Nothing too out of the ordinary. My parents divorced when I was 3. My stepdad was in my life, but by the time I was 7, and he and my mom have been married almost 30 years now. And so he's been, a force in my life ever since then. My mom and I are extremely close. My real problem with alcohol started in college. Just having a ball, but in your 20s you can do it, right? Or you think you can, anyways. You can drink all night and get up the next morning and go to class and go to work and come home and do the whole thing over again.
Where'd you go? UNC Greensboro, right?
Yeah, UNC Greensboro. So and I loved Greensboro. They called it UNC Gay, which was great for me.
When did you come out of the closet?
I came out at 19. I told my mom when I was 19, and I had already been dating somebody for a while. And I think, for me, it was different because my uncle was also gay, but he had never been in a stable relationship. And so I had been with somebody almost a year by the time I came out. And so it was important for me to make sure that my family knew that just because I'm gay doesn't mean that my life has to look that much different. Now I'm no longer with that person, Brandon. His name was Brandon, and he and I split up in 2014. And then I met Zachary, and we moved to Louisiana, and the rest is history. But we're fairly normal. We just bought a house. We pay our car notes and come to and from work. We love each other very much. And so for all intents and purposes, I think you're right. I have this outward appearance of success, but an internal struggle that just doesn't break. And it's hard.
Yeah, and you're intentional with just about everything you do. So you're somebody who you've got others on their heels, right? Before we know it, And I think that's the journalist in you. People are impressed by you. Again, you ask good questions, and you necessarily will usually take the first act in a relationship of any kind. So people are more thinking about how they're going to respond to you than what you're up to. But
you're probably right. I think when I went to rehab in 2014, I was patient of the week, and I was also voted onto the patient advisory council to make substantive change on the. They were splitting people up by gender in big group therapy, and I didn't think that was an adequate representation of sort of day-to-day life or the struggle that we were all going through. And frankly, I didn't feel as comfortable sitting in a room with 50 straight men as I did sitting in the room with the women. And so the rehab center in Wilmington, I went home. They took people who identified as LGBTQ to a specialized AA meeting for LGBTQ individuals.
So the more you get to rehab, which is, by the way, it's almost impossible to change anything in rehab because they're just like, hey, sit down, surrender. But you are that person who goes into rehab and changes the rules, which is next to impossible.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, so right now I realized about 2 months ago that so you and I differ on how we feel with this, but I just don't believe in complete sobriety, even though I know that I am an addict. And there's part of me that clings to the hope, right, that it's still possible for me to one day go out and just grab a beer with some friends, or, I don't drink liquor. I really don't drink wine, and I haven't been drinking during intensive outpatient therapy. I did have a lapse once, but it's hard. I was talking with Devin Sawa about this. He was Casper. He's also in Final Destination. Mm-hmm. And I asked him about how he reconciled the fact that this is the rest of your life. Everywhere you go, alcohol's so easy, right? It's not like harder drugs. It's not, you don't need to see a doctor for it. You can stop by the gas station.
You can't duck it.
No. And so it's everywhere you go. So I asked him how he reconciled, and his point was it took him a couple of years to even come to terms with the fact that he would never drink again. But things had gotten so out of hand for him, and it had upset his life so much that he couldn't continue on. I could feel that happening to me in April. And it's not that I was, it wasn't nearly as bad as it was when I went to inpatient rehab, but I was able to recognize the signs because I had done that before and realized that I had to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, and some people could view this as a mark of your or a sign of your progress, right? Over the course of, because dude, whatever way that people get sober, and hopefully stay sober, it really, and it doesn't matter. I do believe, for me, in total abstinence, right? And that's what this is.
Sure.
That's what this is about. I mean, that's all that works for me because I tried every other way. But in 2014, and I want to jump back there, what gets you into treatment? Because it's kind of a prolific fall from grace.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, you're on the news, you're drinking at work, you're living in Savannah. Just take us back there.
Yeah. So, boy, I hope this doesn't cost me a job in the future. I made a series of mistakes. My relationship was on the fritz. I was dating somebody else outside of my relationship. My uncle died. He was just on his lunch break, and I went to a Walgreens on his lunch break and had a massive heart attack. And I'm 52 years old, a gymnastics coach. He was my gay uncle. We lived together when I was in college. We were close. And that's, for me, when things really, really took a nosedive. I got fired from the news station that I worked at. And I would subsequently get fired from another news station. Before my fiance at the time, Brandon, told me essentially I had to leave. And my mom came and picked me up and drove me straight to a treatment center in Wilmington. And I mean, I was drinking a half gallon of vodka a day, $9.99 rock gut vodka. And in that moment, I wanted help so badly. And I didn't even know where to turn. I'd gone to see this lady who was going to detox me in a hotel room in Savannah for 7 days. And that was her big plan for $7,500. And there was going to be a guy who sat with me in the hotel room the whole time that was a medical professional. It was this very bizarre thing. But my credit wasn't good enough because I'd been drinking so much, I'd stopped paying my bills. And so I'd been looking for help, and come full circle from 2014 to now, even finding this intensive outpatient program, which is it's Modern Recovery. It's online. People from all across the country. They have different times. It's very flexible and innovative in its own way. But even finding that was hard, And I was thinking to myself, I was driving to work yesterday and I saw a guy sitting at a bus stop, right, drinking out of a brown paper bag. And you could tell that it wasn't his first time. And I thought to myself, like, imagine I have rebuilt my life. I'm a successful professional. When I told my boss that I was taking some extra time for me to get the therapy and help that I needed, she was 100% supportive. My coworkers were 100%
This is recently.
supportive.
This is a couple months ago.
This is a couple months ago. But I think to myself, it took me 10 phone calls and 5 days of waiting to even get into Modern Recovery, right? What if that guy wanted to quit drinking at the bus stop? No insurance. What kind of care is he going to be able to receive? And I think that's a real question that we have to think about when we think about recovery in this country, because alcohol is so prevalent and because our healthcare system is so broken, it's probably impossible or damn near impossible for those people to get the help that they need. And I mean, and I'm talking about, like, as I've been doing Modern Recovery, like, there have been moments during even this where the procedural aspect of sort of how they handle
it's
things
a pain
has gotten
in the
in the
ass.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I told them,
yeah.
So I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, there was somebody in group who was really frustrating, would never mute their mic. For me, it was just a huge distraction and something that I'm really trying to focus here.
I wish I had video of this.
You know how I am. So, they've encouraged us to build these outside relationships.
Yeah.
And, I sent a text message to somebody expressing my frustration, and there was concern amongst the group that I was making fun of this other person, which I really wasn't doing. It was just, It was frustrating, and I didn't feel like enough was being done. You sent it to somebody else
in the group, like, hey, what the hell?
In the group, like, I was like, it was essentially eyeballs, and it was like, wow, this is a wild time, right? Like this, I think I said something to the effect of, my frustration, I know, is showing on my face. Well, the next thing I know, I get a call that Monday saying that I can either change group times or I'm out. Right. And I'm like, whoa. That can't be the answer. Like, I didn't even know that they were concerned about this. I had never talked about it with them. And so about an hour and a half later, I got a call that said they had changed their minds, and I talked to a supervisor, and it was a whole thing. But I'm at a movie theater, right, 50 feet from a bar. I'm like looking at it as I'm standing there, and I'm like, why on earth should trying to do the right thing and take care of yourself make you want to drink? Like that should not be the procedure and the policy and the way things are handled for people who say that they're focused on getting people treatment. And this is a professional organization that they do a good job. And so we've explored this since then with my therapist and my recovery coach and
what do they
the
say?
Issues that there was a lot of apologizing that it was handled wrong, and that's the thing, right? Like, and this is where I get hung up. I'm like, okay, so I was okay. I did not go to that movie theater bar. I went back and finished watching this ridiculous movie that Zach made me go see.
What movie?
It's called Men.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. But like, so I went back, watched the movie, we left. I was upset. I mean, I'm like, here I am really trying to be proactive and help myself. And I think that they both understood that. And there was a lot of communication breakdowns internally and things that I'll never know about, right? Because a lot of it's HIPAA related and has to do with other people. And that's all well and good. But like I told them, I said, I hope somebody is helped by whatever happened here, right? Because it is hard to get into these programs in the first place. It's hard to get better.
It's hard to want to get into them.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to want, and then if you want, that's just the first step.
Yeah,
because that you can want all day long, but that's not going to pay for it.
Yeah,
and that's not going to get you the quality of care that you need to be sustainable outside of an inpatient facility or an intensive outpatient program.
Yeah, and I so appreciate what you're saying because it paints the picture, right, of how delicate this shit really is. I mean, the fact that you didn't go drink, I mean, there's probably 80 to 85 to, I don't know, 99 out of 100 people that would have drank over that. And
I almost did.
Yeah, and the fact that you didn't is a miracle because here's another thing I'll tell you. You're in the fact, I mean, I guess they weren't going to kick you out. And this is, I wasn't there. I don't know all the details. But the fact that, anybody that's that early in sobriety stops drinking and you get on a group with other people, there's going to be all kinds of conflict. There just is. And
sure.
That's why, for me, like going to an inpatient rehab and then going to an extended care place, because I needed walls up. There was a lot of stuff that was going to go down. So I'm surprised they didn't have a higher level of tolerance with any kind of misbehavior that early on in somebody's recovery. It's to be expected.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that too, but I think that's the nature of the industry, right? Like at some point frankly, it's a money-making machine, right? Yeah. Like that much we know. Like there's a lot of money in recovery. But we've got to be smarter about this stuff. And if it can't be, recovery is not Amazon, right? It's not like a one size fits all, one click, ship it, every person gets the same thing. It can't be that way. And that's not how we can think about it. My recovery, I mean, just by being in group, my recovery is so much different than other people's inside the same group. And it was the same way when I was in inpatient rehab. My recovery was so much different and felt so much different. I mean, when I was an inpatient, I was with folks who were on heroin or crack or meth, really hard stuff. And what they were dealing with, I can't even imagine or relate to because mine was vodka, right? And that still remains the case for me today. Like I cannot drink vodka. I really shouldn't be drinking anything.
I would say you can't drink at all, or you shouldn't drink at all, right? I think when we start to use can't and all that stuff, but because you talked to me about your life, the 2014, where we lose jobs, we're in rehab, and you're back again now. You're in this. you're in this group and you're seeking help again, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I could say too, yeah, well, and in your defense, see, I'm a 12-step guy, right? I'm a product of, I go I say it here, I go to AA, and that works for me now. And I would tell you, hey, Chris, keep going, keep going. However, do I know what it's like to be a gay dude walking into an AA meeting? Or then if you're going to try to be with other gay guys, now you got to go to a crystal meth anonymous meeting, because that's a lot of times, like I remember being in New York, my gay friends would go to CMA. I don't know what that's like.
You know what's so funny? So when I went to the gay A meetings after I left inpatient rehab in 2014, and the first thing that happened was 2 people hit on me, and I never went back.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Like, no, I'm not here to pick up a date. That's not the reason I showed up here today. And that's always really frustrated me. Like, damn it, I just wanted to come here and get better. And I found no solace in that. And you and I have talked about, I'm not a big 12-step guy, but I know that works really well for some people. And my thing is always, and I talked about this in group, but if it's working for you, keep it up. Like, that's what matters, right? Whatever works for you. And so in April, when I was like, okay, this has got to change, and Zach and I had a very lengthy conversation. And
did anything happen that brought you to this? Any incident? No, it's just that I cycle. Like I talk about this a lot in group, but my thing is I hate having a hangover, and nothing cures a hangover like hair of the dog, right? And I mean, I totally identify with that. I mean, it's just like, why be hungover when I can feel so good again by just doing this?
I can fix it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens. And then I get to a point where I'm just drinking all day, every day. And I'll tell you what it was. And you're gonna be pissed, but Zach said to me, I'm tired of watching you sleep on the couch. I feel like all I do is watch you sleep. And I'm stealing my 30s from myself.
Yeah.
I'm stealing these memories from myself. I'm taking them away from myself. I just don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to keep stealing my memories from me. The life I've built with Zach, we're both successful. We have a lot of fun. We went to New Orleans, stayed on Bourbon Street for our 5th wedding anniversary, and didn't drink a thing. Now, that was not the easiest thing I've ever done.
That's where you got engaged, by the way.
That is where I got engaged and married.
Yeah.
You were there for my engagement, as a matter of fact.
I sure was, yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun day. But stone cold sober, and we had a ball.
Well, and that's what pisses me off about somebody like you. And I'm just whatever, but you have a light coming off you and an incredible personality, regardless. You do. So you're not one of those people who, when I drink, Mr. Personality comes out. You've got it, but you also have this thing, right? You got this monkey on your back. Because, and to bring it back to what you were just saying, you can go to New Orleans with the person that you're so deeply in love with and have a blast without drinking. What does that say to you?
That I can do it.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second, but right now, a word from our sponsors.
It has to take it. So it's emotionally draining, though, right? It's exhausting to think about it as much as I have to think about it to not want to drink, because the easier thing to do is just to pick up a drink. Then I don't have to fucking think about it. But if I'm not drinking, I'm thinking about it. And I got to a point over the course of the evening, where I just made a conscious decision that I was not going to drink during that trip, and I didn't. And on the way home, Zach's sunroof literally exploded. I'm telling you, man, everything was working against us on that trip, but we still made it through. And both of us were sober. I mean, Zach was not drinking out of solidarity. He doesn't, have a drinking problem, but he's doing it to be a partner to me. But we had made a conscious decision, and so I'll tell you, the pandemic was really hard on me personally, working from home, having availability to alcohol, having more responsibility, but less accountability, if that makes sense.
Well, you're not the first alcoholic, and I'm going to call you an alcoholic. You're not the first alcoholic.
I am an alcoholic.
You're not the first one to say that. A lot of people, and I meant to ask you that early on, the pandemic pushed a lot of people over the edge or moved them much closer to it in drug and alcohol usage.
And I went to the hospital several times for pancreatitis. Several times. I mean, that's the very definition of an addict, right? Doing something that hurts you and continuing to do it, even though it hurts you. So several times I was in the hospital. I've been to the hospital in Baton Rouge. I'm going to end up with chronic pancreatitis and die at 65 if I don't do something now.
Well, okay, so we're doing something now. You've been. We
are doing something now.
So for 2 months, we're sober. We're going to this outpatient, and what I hear in your voice, and I can only hope that this will sustain itself. But people say that sobriety and I'm going to just throw sobriety in there for what they say for like this program, a 12-step program, but whatever you want to incorporate or put in there. Sobriety is not for people who need it, but for people who want it. Now, people are listening to this and they're arguing with me and they disagree, but that's worked for me. And it sounds to me like you want it. Because that situation at the bar or at the movie theater, like that's a guy who wants it. Because at some point you're going to want it. Now, there's all kinds of other things that you weave into whatever your version of recovery is. But the first thing I think is people have to want it. And for you, the gift that I'm hearing too is you're getting. I think if any human being that just thaws out and you give yourself a week, and then maybe God, I mean, you give us 30 days, we'll refund all your misery, right? Like that's the truth. You want to go back to drinking, that's fine, but for somebody to be thawed out for a little bit, now you're starting to think like, man, like, because now you're putting time together. You know that time with Zach can be had again in sobriety.
Yeah, it's a good point. And what was really funny? So we went down to the gay area of New Orleans, and we went to this bar that we usually like to go to, and they didn't have any non-alcoholic beer, so we left. And then we went to this seedy little gay strip club right off of Bourbon. And it was an older crowd, and they had O'Douls, right? There were people there drinking club soda, right? These are people in recovery. These were our people, And it was like this seedy little hole in the wall club was the most comfortable, and we had a ball. Like just, it's New Orleans, so it's whatever. But like, we had fun, and we had our O'Douls. And I don't know how you feel about flying too close to the sun with non-alcoholic beers and all that stuff, but it works for me, and it gives me sort of just something to do with my hands, and makes me feel like
I'll drink non-alcoholic beer once in a while. I don't recommend it, but I do. I mean, I will. I've never had any sort of issue with it.
Every now and again,
I don't frown.
But it was nice to. It was 10:30 at night. We had a wonderful dinner. We'd gone out. We went to the Preservation Hall to see the jazz band, and then we found this little bar and had a non-alcoholic beer and struck up conversation with people and talked to people. And so I'm getting more and more comfortable with the fact that I don't need it. And that's where I'm at now, because I want to live a long and healthy life. And I want to do it with my husband and my friends. And I want to have a successful career, and I want to do all of these things. But I can't do them all and keep cycling.
No, no, because the stakes are getting too high. One, from a health perspective, from what you've shared with me, and I got the same kind of stuff where I just don't have the wiggle room. And two, relationships and career and just personal relationships, right? That's kind of why we're here on earth, to have conversations like this, to genuinely connect with other people. This gives me the oomph and the walking on air that alcohol and drugs used to give to me. And if I stay sober, I can continue to connect with people on this level. And so it just kind of moves me forward until I'm to a point where, okay, I don't fiend for alcohol today because of the work I'm doing on myself. But I know if I put it in my body, that sets off a cycle that I've witnessed so many times before that can bring me to my knees or kill me.
I mean, then that's exactly where I'm at. And it's like, listen, I survived the battlefield in Afghanistan.
You were over in Afghanistan, right? Working, covering it. Yeah.
Covering the war. I survived that. I've covered 20 some odd hurricanes or tropical storms. I've stood out in all kinds of elements, done all kinds of journalism, good policy work, government-wise, from the municipalities to the state of Louisiana. And I'm really proud of the things that I've been able to accomplish. But I'm also acutely aware of the fact that most of the most successful things that I've ever done in my life have been done while I was sober.
Well, it's funny, and you're a strong guy. I'll hang in there and take this compliment just so people can understand how comfortable Chris is with his sexuality and how much, trailblazer. I don't know if you'll accept that, but you didn't even mention coming out of the closet.
Yeah, I mean, that was 2019. I'm pretty sure I tried to come out in 7th grade, but Mom told me to go back downstairs and finish playing pool. We talked about it later. So we did talk about it later, like 5 years later.
Is it hard for you as a gay guy? Do you find yourself comparing yourself out a little bit? And because I know a ton, I'm going to give you a gay guy's phone number that I'm going to make you call. I know a ton of guys, and because I've never felt this from you about the sincerity about being sober. I mean, you are sober and you want to stay sober. And prior, I just didn't want to waste anybody's time. But is it hard for you to identify? Because I will tell you, there's a boatload. I mean, millions upon millions of sober gay people. But I do know if you walk into a meeting, a 12-step meeting, or you walk into a rehab or any room that I've been into related to recovery, outside of going to a CMA meeting with my buddy Steven, I mean, it doesn't scream alternative lifestyle sometimes. It just doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And I think, I mean, drinking is a part of American culture, but it is certainly ingrained in gay culture. I mean, from vodka sodas at the club to bottomless mimosas at brunch, right? Like it is gay culture to drink. And that in and of itself presents its own set of issues, I think. That makes it tough. And, that's something that I've really struggled with. That's why we were so happy 2 weeks ago when we found that little bar. Yeah, because it felt like a place where we could be comfortable. And none of the loud techno music, nobody was spilling vodka sodas on other people on the dance floor. And it's also like, gay culture is also like a body image thing. And, I'm not the skinniest guy in the world. I'm not physically, I'm not ripped, but that's a thing that people associate with gay culture too. So there's a lot of competitiveness. There can be a lot of shame involved in gay culture that's not healthy. But the flip side of that is that there's also family in it, and they call it your chosen family, but there are a lot of folks who don't have the support system that I was lucky enough to have. I've got Zach, I've got a good family. I have the means to afford this intensive outpatient program and the insurance to help me pay for it. I was able to go to inpatient rehab and have my parents support me with that because they knew I needed help. So I am in all the ways that I could turn to look for a disadvantage. I am certainly somebody who is very, very lucky. And being gay is just a small part of the overall picture.
Yeah, and that's cool you mentioned that, because I know, first of all, your perspective shift is noticeable for me, and second of all, I know gay men and women who would tell you, like, don't let any kind of fucking terminal uniqueness keep you from getting sober, because that will kill you.
Yeah.
Eventually. I mean, it will. And it doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, black, or white. That's the one thing I talk about addiction, man. Whew, it is the great equalizer. It is the great,
yes.
No matter who you are, if you've got this shit, you are going down. That's it. I mean, that's it. You can masquerade and you can walk around and you can fake it for only so long until the jig is up, man. People are out of moves. And
yeah, I mean, it when I went to the hospital in November, the doctor said, the way you're drinking is affecting your bone marrow. Now, think about that. Like, it was literally affecting my bone marrow, not just my pancreas, not just my liver and my kidney function and all those things, which have improved, by the way, but like my bone marrow, because I was cycling so hard, all I was doing was drinking and drinking. And she's like, this is going to kill you. You should not be middle-aged. So after November, I started seeing a therapist weekly her name is Rachel, and I love her. I just saw her yesterday. And now I needed something a little more intensive, so I'm doing this outpatient. And one of the things we've really
it sounds like you were still drinking, right? Because you didn't stop from November, you stopped in April.
Right. I was still, right. That was not enough.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm an alcoholic. But like, we talked about diversifying your coping mechanisms. And, if you want to eat a pizza one day because you're stressed out and you had a long day, that's fine. Just don't do it every day. You want to go for a 10-mile run, that's fine. But don't push yourself to the limits, to the extremes.
That. Yeah, I like that.
You want to eat a giant piece of cake, by all means. Don't eat the whole cake. And so I've been thinking a lot about that and about just how I view myself and what that looks like and what, I've got. So I was saying in group that, that New Orleans trip was the first time I've ever celebrated anything without drinking. And when I got into this program, I wanted to learn how to celebrate. I want to know how to mourn, and I want to know how to cope with boredom without drinking. Like, those three things are the things that I really need to drill down on myself and understand.
Yeah.
Because that's where I get myself into trouble.
Well, yeah,
every time.
And you're walking, as many doors as I walked through when I was drinking and using in a negative fashion. On the other side of that, in sobriety, I've walked through so many difficult doors, getting repetition, right? Like whether it's a first date or whether it's celebrating something or whether it's mourning the loss of somebody, doing it all without alcohol or drugs that first time. It's always going to be, I don't know. Some people could say it's a breeze. For me, it was never the case. But
that's not the case for me either.
Yeah, you build on those moments. And before you know it, it's not about getting through them. Like you said, it's about celebrating them. It's about, man, like I think that moment you had with Zach is so beautiful, because when I would have those moments in my early sobriety, I'd be like, oh, fuck, I can do this. Like, this is this is fun. And I think the more you the more of those times you put together, it's a body of work that you can speak to. I want to ask you a few things. So you're telling me, Chris, I've known you for a long time, and I've known you. I mean, you've told me you've made a couple like Hail Mary phone calls to me, and I don't want to call them Hail Mary phone calls, but like, hey, what do I do? And I love you all the same. I mean, if you noticed, I didn't care if you were drinking or you weren't drinking. I enjoyed your personality so much, I would be around on either side of it. But I mean, we're talking about a guy who stopped drinking in 2014. You know, there's employment situations that ultimately cratered because of alcohol. And,
Sure.
you know, like relationships, I'm sure. And now your health, right? You've got everything pointing to, I can't ever drink again, because if I do, I'll cycle again, and the cycling is killing me. Are you to a point now where you're like, I know that I need to not drink forever, or are you still thinking about? And I don't want to talk about. I guess are you in a mode where, hey, if I just don't drink today, I'll be okay and we'll deal with tomorrow, or are you thinking at some point I've got to drink?
No, but right now it's one day at a time. It really is that. It's like, hey, if I don't drink today, that's great. Tomorrow, that's great. If I can get a weekend, that's great. If I can get a month in, that's great. Not going to the bar at the movie theater was huge for me. Not drinking in New Orleans was huge for me. Reason tells me that I cannot continue to do this. But there's another part of my brain that says it's possible for you to drink like a normal person. And every single day that goes by, I get further and further away from that.
There you go. I mean, that's because, dude, you know, I'm sober more than 10 years, and I will have drunk dreams. I will walk by an airport bar in the winter when it's snowing outside, and there'll be attractive people taking down cold beers, and I'm like, fuck. And then I'm always like, wow, that's interesting. Like that is still there inside me. And then I've walked 10 more paces and it's gone. And if I can't shake it, I have this muscle memory where I can talk to somebody else about what's going on. But now I really don't. Nothing plagues me, but it still comes through my mind. So that's normal, I would say. And again, I'm not a therapist, but we're two friends having a conversation. And these are all things that I've experienced before and still do experience with the alcoholic mind. Like, it never goes away. It'll remind you once in a while. And that humility is something that I need, you know, in everyday life pretty much. Like, oh yeah, like if I decide that I can have a drink tonight, like I may not go to jail tomorrow, but I could be in prison in a year. You know,
right.
And that's just
right.
It's eventually whatever is going to come is coming. That's one thing I know in the bottom of my heart. So that keeps me from drinking one day at a time if I do have those urges.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard. I mean, airports are especially hard, but that's the way I've always viewed it, and you and I've talked about this before, but like as complete sobriety just doesn't work, right? And you and I disagree on that. But
it sounds like we agree on it.
The more I go through IOP, the more I talk with other people about their situations, and frankly, seeing how people have been where I was in 2014 and knowing just how badly I don't want to be back there. And how much I don't want Zach to have to, I mean, frankly, I don't want him to have to live that life. I don't want him to have to deal, that shouldn't be his cross to bear too. And I have some responsibility there things that I need to do. And that includes not drinking, taking a hard look at myself, reminding myself of what's actually important. And that's not always easy work, but it's important work, you know?
Do you ever think that, you are part of you And the solution to this could be you helping other people going through your struggles that you're going through.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason I talked to you over the weekend and wanted to do this. I think it's important to know that people can be successful and still struggle.
I think so too. And it does. You don't have to. Yeah.
I mean that's crucial, right? And so I mean I need to be sober for a while longer before I could get a job at a place where I could use my skill set to help other people. They require that, of course. But
is that something you want to do?
I don't know. I've been giving it some thought, and dealing with the issues at Modern and thinking about the issues at my first rehab facility. I can't help but think that like there's got to be a better way forward, and maybe helping to change something like that from the inside, or whether it's using my experience in politics to help make change. There's a problem in this country. It's hard to get well, and that just should not be the case in a civilized, industrialized nation. I just don't think it should be this hard to get well.
Yeah, like if you don't have the means, you shouldn't have to know somebody or just have, okay, shit, now I guess I'll get a bed at the Salvation Army. Like that's tough, like that's
right.
That's daunting because,
and I mean, after the first 5 phone calls I made trying to find an intensive outpatient program, it would have been very easy to just give up, and stop because, well, fuck, if they don't, if they're not answering the phone, if they're not calling you back, if they don't take your insurance, if they're going to make it this hard, then what, maybe I'm not that bad off. I don't know. But like, I at least had to push through to keep making the phone calls until somebody answered. But what if you don't have a phone? What if you don't? Yeah, you know what I mean?
And it's difficult for me because my only experience, hey, just keep showing up to meetings, right? But even me, that didn't work. I was lucky enough to have the resources where I could go to treatment. Not everybody gets that opportunity. I have seen people crawl into meetings homeless and with nothing, like the ultimate low of the low who are, law abiding, people who are giving back to society in big ways. But I mean, and that's one thing too that we're talking about today. Look, man, I mean, it's fucking hard to get sober. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a reflection of this conversation. Like it is hard to get sober, like the percentages are not in your favor to stay sober. But if you do stay sober, your percentages at a good life, a good fulfilling life, I say great life, are going up and up and through and through the ceiling, really.
Yeah.
Chris, I'd bet everything I have on you if you can continue to at least work towards not drinking again for the rest of your life. Every day to work and want that. I don't bet on you if I know you're actively drinking. I love you. Right, but I don't bet on you. That's just not a good bet.
I think that's fair. And this is this is what the struggle really sounds like 2 months in. And I know there've been all kinds of people on your podcast who've been doing this for years, who've had successful careers, who've found their way out of this. But 2 months in, and this is where I'm at. Man, I mean, you've seen me at very low points. I distinctly remember a day you called me and told me not to go to work. And I think you know what day I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I remember that day and I think about it. And I did not go to work, thank God. But, it has been a roller coaster. And I hate it about myself. I hate it so much.
And
I wish I wasn't an alcoholic.
You can turn it on its ear, and you can use it to help yourself and other people and live a great life. I have experienced that. I want to say too, although, sure, I'm the guy who called you and told you that, but you're the person I love. You're the person who had me over to multiple Thanksgivings. You're the person who I shared a lot of, I'm having good, clean fun. Maybe you're not, you were, you weren't, but like, you're somebody whose company I like really, really, really enjoy. Like, I adore Zach. I mean, so that is like, so for, I don't, not that it's like a privilege, but there's a lot of people I'm just like, oh, like, I guess they're going to do what they're going to do. But it's not many people who are still in active addiction that I would pick up the phone for and make those calls,
Yeah, no, I mean, and I have so much respect for you. And
I should have let you come to work and get fired. That would have been another consequence. That's what we're supposed to do.
Not what you should have done. Yeah. For your audience, it was the day after the 2016 election, and it didn't turn out the way I had hoped it would.
Do what a lot of people.
I can say that now that I don't work in news anymore.
Well, by the way, I cut you off. You were saying you had immense respect for me. Come on, keep it coming.
No, I do. I always have. I mean, you and I have been joking around since the day I showed up at KNOE when you were a baby news anchor, and
that's horrible.
And you're. Now I gotta say that.
Yeah, but, it's terrible.
It wasn't the greatest.
What about Bob Walters, our old news director, called me into his office, and like only Bob can. He said, "Wow, I've seen worse." But I was like, "Shit, man, I'm in trouble. You know
the story I'm thinking of that you did, right?
Oh, the one about the bears?
Bears. Bears in your backyard. I was like, this man, who is this man?
This guy needs
work. You know what's great, though? I mean, like, you were a champ at taking constructive criticism. You worked in some of, I would argue, the toughest situations and scenarios one person could be put in on a news desk, and you handled them with grace and compassion. And you got better, and you were committed. And I'll be damned if that same man didn't hire you again to work in an even better station in a bigger market. So for me, there's just always been an immense amount of respect there for you. And to, you talk about me being a trailblazer, but you being sober and out and proud about being sober and able to have these kinds of conversations, I think is extremely important for the same reason. People need to know that successful people struggle too.
Yeah. And honestly, all those compliments you just gave me, that was all that for me, that was recovery working for me. That was my sobriety working through me, because I'd learned, when I said it a million times, I lived in a recovery house. I'm working at a KFC. So now working at KNOE in difficult situations or wherever else I know what this is like. I know how to be humble and just to keep moving forward. You don't want to be saddled with a fool's task, but when you're connected with people, you know what the right thing is to do and to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what else you got? Anything else? So what do you got? A meeting? You got to go? Come on. I wrap this up. So anything you got anything else? Because we both have to go, but.
I would just say that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not going to be easy. So don't go into it expecting it to be easy, but it gets better.
Are you going to keep doing it?
Yeah, I am.
All right. Let me know how you're doing. I love you, buddy.
All right, buddy. I love you too.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Experiences are what people love the most about travel. That's why they love Viator. They have over 300,000 bookable experiences and something for everyone. Plus, their travel experiences have millions of real traveler reviews, so you have the information you need to book the best activities for your trip. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. One app, over 300,000 travel experiences you'll remember. Do more with Viator.